prepare for his move, a bay pen was constructed in a pristine Icelandic bay. Finally, the day arrived to return Keiko to the home he barely knew. This had been Keiko's unexpected journey to freedom that millions of children demanded, but that no one knew exactly how to accomplish. Jean-Michel had watched Keiko's transformation for over 2.5 years and had been witness to his devoted fans.
Good luck!
Even the U.S. Air Force had agreed to rent a C-17 cargo plane and crew for the trip, announcing it was in the best interest of the nation to fly Keiko home. He was covered in ointment for the flight to protect his skin from drying. After 15 anxious hours out of his element, Keiko was at last returned to the cold ocean waters of his birth. It was seen as the first step to restoring what had been taken away when he was captured. Keiko would first have to acclimate inside the confines of the bay pen. Months later, his world expanded to the enclosed bay, where for the first time, he ruled in relative freedom. It was Keiko's first chance at a small piece of the wild. Not since he was 2 years old had he experienced the sights, and especially the complexity of sounds, of a natural ocean environment. It had been 23 years, half his expected lifetime, since Keiko had even seen the bottom of the sea. Keiko's world was gradually expanding, and for the next step, a satellite tag was attached to his rare flopped dorsal fin in order to follow him at sea. Its attachment was no more painful than piercing an ear, but the tag and Keiko would have to wait another season following complications to be tested at sea. Finally, in the summer of 2000, sea trials began. Everything from then on was up to Keiko. The difficult promise to give him the choice of freedom had been kept. Then at last, Keiko was within feet of wild killer whales. He seemed enthusiastic at first, but then experienced what might have been shyness or fear and turned back. Later encounters looked aggressive, and Keiko continued to seek the shelter of the boat.
Right there, Chad. Right there. Right. Where's his feet, Michael?
Over 3 summers, Keiko continued to approach passing whales, spending more time with them, possibly learning their ways. Then in 2002, after watching a pod feed on herring, he simply swam away in the proximity of whales. For over 2 months, Keiko was tracked by satellite. His course revealed no details about his experiences in the wild, but he emerged 1,000 miles away, sufficiently fed and unscathed. An enormous success. Then, perhaps seeking human companionship or just chasing an easy meal, Keiko followed a fishing boat into a Norwegian fjord. Keiko was still alone, but he was welcomed by enchanted children who must have felt they already knew him. Strong bonds are undeniably formed between captive orcas like Keiko and people. But we've been slow to consider that the ocean's greatest predator, wild and free, may also be curious to understand us.
Hey, I see you there. Come on, come on. Hello, hello. Who's that? Come on, hello. What you doing? What are you doing? And I said, oh,
Do both of these whales take interest in your boat?
Well, you know, as a scientist, you have to say no. But as a whale hugger, oh, for sure. You know, there's no doubt in my mind.
Right there. You see him?
Yeah, he's right there. He's right under us. I see his fin.
Hang right in there so you can see him.
You know, when he's swimming on the side underwater like that, he can see you through the water surface just like you can see him. So it's a bit distorted, but he definitely knows that you're there. So, you know, leaning right over and looking at him, it's just as interesting for him as it is for you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And I find if I take no notice of them and I put on my scientific face and I just take my notes and everything, they don't interact. But if I have a good time with them and really interact with them, then they get all involved as well.
Oh.
Yeah.
In an effort to both protect orcas and to involve the public,
Orca Hotline, Ingrid speaking.
Ingrid founded the Orca Project Hotline.
Oh, that's fantastic news. And so what direction were they going when you saw them?
Her nationally advertised number rings with reports of orca sightings and strandings like that of the whale she named Ben.
Oh, Ben. He stranded in 1997, and I knew him before the stranding, but when you're involved with an animal at that sort of level, there's just something about it, you know, and they look you in the eye and they're at your mercy to rescue them. And with Ben, we had an overnight ordeal, and then we rescued him, and the next day he was back with another group of orca, which was just incredible. But a year later, he got run over by a boat, and it was just tragic. But a year later, I found him, and his dorsal fin, the back half, had completely collapsed and folded over. So now he's got this funny little fin where bit sticks up and the rest folds down. But he survived, and he's very cautious of boats now. But he'll still come over to my boat. I think that by showing people the variation within the individuals, it makes the animals a little bit more personable, if you like. If somebody can call me up and say, hey, I just saw Ben, it gives them a little bit of a stake in Ben's life. And so hopefully, you know, they'll slow down their boats, they'll drive a little more respectfully. The data, of course, is really valuable for my research, but ultimately I want it to be that the public will want to protect these animals.
Keiko, however, was at risk of being loved too much by a well-meaning public. The Norwegian government passed laws to protect him, and the Free Willy Keiko Foundation and the Humane Society of the U.S. agreed to continue his care. He arrived in Norway, obviously having fed himself at sea, but without fish in the fjord, concern grew, and the decision was made to begin feeding him again. Keiko had everything he needed, except the company of his own kind. In 2003, after more than a year in Norway, at age 26, relatively young for a male orca, Keiko took a final breath and died from a pneumonia-like virus. His burial was the last outpouring of affection for the whale we thought we knew and who had done everything we asked. Keiko was the whale we had forever changed. And no matter how good our intentions, he was the whale we couldn't fix for him to become what nature had intended, an orca in the close company of other whales. It wasn't possible, even for the world's most loved, most famous whale.
I think it would be quite impossible for anybody to propose capturing an orca, at least in North American waters at this point. So I think in that sense we've come quite a long way in terms of public attitudes. In terms of what we understand about orcas, we've also come a long way. I think at this point we understand enough about orca society to realize that this is complex and remarkable and fascinating. And we don't have the whole story yet, but what we do understand is really, really interesting.
The debate about returning captive orcas to the wild and keeping them in captivity continues passionately, especially as we learn more about them, and continue to discover that there may be few other species more like ourselves. There do still remain countries tolerant of capturing orcas, But in most of the world, any up-close, hands-on contact comes when a whale ends up on the beach, stranded. Ingrid Visser is again changing what we know.
You know, there was a lot of controversy, and there still is, about saving stranded whales and dolphins. People say that they have crushed internal organs from sitting on the beach for so long, and then other people say that they're no longer viable. The stress hormones and all of this sort of thing, that these animals can't reproduce, and that they're basically a drain on society if you put them back, because they're going to be eating fish and contributing nothing. So Miracle, she's stranded. She was rescued, and then I saw her again after the rescue 3 years later. And then about 5 years later, she had her first calf, and that calf is called Magic. So it was really, really incredible to see Miracle, who had this stranding event, been rescued, and then had her very first calf, and the calf has survived. So yeah, magic it was.
How cool was that? Wow. Orca hotline, Ingrid speaking.
In the middle of her research, Ingrid gets a call that a small female orca is stranded on an isolated beach in heavy surf. She and the team rush to assist.
She's somewhere on this bit of coastline here. We're not sure exactly where, but this area here, these lines on the chart are marking that it's really rough and surf breaking. So we're kind of hoping we'll be able to pick her up and move her by tractor and trailer somewhere into here. Okay, well, let's do it.
Time is critical in a stranding rescue, so Ingrid and Jean-Michel will fly directly while the team drives the 5 hours to the site. New Zealand's hills are bordered by a twisting 9,300-mile coastline. Whale strandings are fairly common, but successful rescues are not.
The orca was first sighted around 1 o'clock by some hikers in a very remote part of the west coast, west of Auckland, tossing and turning in the surf.
We ultimately got to the beach, and indeed, this young female, a little over 3 meters long, was very badly stranded.
So when we actually first saw her, of course, there's just the natural emotions of just wanting to break down and cry, and knowing that she's away from her family, and knowing that she has no idea if we're people that are going to help her or hurt her.
But help comes by digging holes for her flukes and flippers to relieve the discomfort, then keeping her skin moist. She was probably not alone, struggling in the surf, and another whale may have tried to pull her back to sea, judging from the marks raked across her tailstock. Ingrid names her Reiki. Most important to her survival is keeping the young whale hydrated after hours of stress on the beach. Ingrid is successful in getting her to accept a tube bringing water. It's a triage that also involves reassurance and comfort. Even with expert care under changing conditions, it's believed that an orca can survive only about 24 hours out of water.
Hopefully, she'll be okay, and hopefully reunited with her pod. She's a young female, needs her family. We're very, very anxious to see her back in the ocean, in her world.
We moved the animal just right up above this tiny little town where there is a facility where we could pull the truck and the trailer right next to a freshwater source. So we had a hose where we could water her down, and we had an ongoing watch throughout the night. But finally, by 4 a.m., we knew it was time for Ingrid and Carl and the team to discuss what the options were to get her back into the water.
There is her family. Carl and I have done orca strandings before, where 2 hours after we released the orca, it met up with its family. So it can be a long way away, and the animals will return if they hear her, but they won't be able to hear her calling if she's inside here over the bar with the surf. But then if we take her to the other coast, it's 100% guaranteed she won't find her family immediately. That's the worst con for both scenarios is that where is her family?
I defer to you more often than not biological in terms of your knowledge.